Welcome to a very special Cloud Talk Live right here from Las Vegas, Nevada at the amazing reInvent 2023. All right, I know that it's not 8:30 Central Time. It's a little bit later than that. We've been hard at work over here in Las Vegas, up here in our makeshift studio, recording all sorts of great customers. We've talked to some great AWSers, some partners. In fact, here a little bit later, you're going to get to see one of those, well, a portion of one of those interviews that I had with my good friend Keith Lawrence over at App Dynamics. We have a great partnership with them and have enjoyed just getting to know those guys over the past several years. Well, why do I hear myself? All right, so so there's been so much that's been happening here. Now there was a keynote last night, and there were some really interesting announcements from that. But this morning was Adam's big keynote. This was it was like 2.5 hours. I do a lot of public speaking, but that's an awful lot of public speaking. So as we get into this, I'm going to really share what some of the big announcements were that you need to know. Now, if I'm going to talk to you, I'd love for you to talk back to me. So I need you to tell me who you are and where you are. Introduce yourselves in the comments down below. I've got my iPad right here. I can look down from time to time and see who is there. So again, my name is Jeff DeVerter. I'm the Chief Technology Evangelist here at Rackspace Technology. And this week really is your source to all things AWS reInvent. Well, let's jump into it a little bit, shall we? We'll talk about some of the announcements. Now, this may shock you. They're talking about Gen AI an awful lot. Who knew? That's what everybody talks about these days, is Gen AI. Now, they've done some pretty amazing things. Now, we're going to step through it. In fact, if I were to break down Adam's keynote this morning, there was really three. You could maybe talk about four main sections. I'll break it into three. Now, interspersed in there, they had some really interesting customer testimonials. Pfizer was up there. They had BMW. That was the one I thought was really kind of cool because they were showing this car, mock-ups of this car that's going to come out in 2025. Going to come out in 2025. So we have to wait another 1.5 years. But a completely redesigned interior. It really does look like, well, it's stuff of the future, if you ask me. Now, when we think about his big announcements, they really started like other conferences have done. And it started with talking about, well, the foundation of enabling Gen AI. And very quickly, Jensen from over at NVIDIA, CEO over in NVIDIA, was up on stage. He has been making the rounds this year at all of the events and really nothing shy about what they're going to be doing together. In fact, if I look down here at my notes, one of the big things was they're bringing their DGX cloud to AWS. Now, this is a massive cloud of capabilities around training and running Gen AI models. And it will bring 65 exaflops. Gotta admit, don't know what an exaflop is. Got a little homework to do before, well, tomorrow when I come back to talk to you about more stuff. But they're bringing 65 exaflops to the capabilities. Project Seba, apparently Project Seba is named after the Seba tree in the Amazon. Picking up on a vibe here. And it's one of the largest that's down there. And so it is bringing this capability together that will enable the training of Gen AI models in half the time that they would take before that. And so that was really interesting. And Daniel Gibson, producer Daniel, always the wealth of resource. An exaflop is a measure of performance for a supercomputer. That's right. They can be calculated in at least 1 quadrillion floating point operations per second. 1 quadrillion. So they have 65 of them. So that, okay, Daniel, do 65 quadrillion. Doesn't matter. It's fast. It cuts the training time of models in half, and that's really important. In fact, that became a big theme for this whole first section when we think about the infrastructure inside of the AWS cloud, of the capability of whether it is native NVIDIA cloud capability brought to the AWS cloud or their own silicon, like around Trainium and Inferentia. I love the names of these things. It kind of tells you what they are by the names. But basically improving the speed, whether it's 4x faster on some of those training models, and really quite impressive. All of that being tied together to, oh, thank you very much, to what they're able to do in and around Bedrock. Now, also, they brought the ability to reserve some of these GPUs because a lot of people go in and they have to subscribe to them and hold on to them and not necessarily use them all the time. Now you have the ability to subscribe just to the capabilities that you need, well, when you need it. So that was really pretty cool. And I gotta admit, I watched, there were several parts in here, and I didn't see this in the other cloud providers' keynotes throughout the year, but there was a little mudslinging going on towards the other clouds, not just standing up and showing how they have more capabilities, but really kind of egging the other guy. We're not going to talk about the other guys, but they sure did. Now they had the CEO of Anthropic come up. Now they have their amazing model, the Claude model, and it's got some amazing capabilities. And one of the things that caught my attention is that their efforts towards responsible AI. And how when there are these groups out there that go out and try to attack these models and get them to break. And a cloud model will break 10% less, no, not 10 times less, much better than 10% than the others, which I thought was really cool. But when you think about training an AI model, if you're not deep into this space, there's a lot that has to happen. First, of course, you have to bring together all of that data, and then those models have to be trained, and there are different phases of that training. And first, of course, there's the broad training, but then there's the fine tuning, but then there's the pre-training, the training, and then the fine tuning. But now there's continued pre-training, which I think is really pretty interesting that they have as well. And what that enables is the continued refinement inside of these environments, which is great. And so those are some the changes and the pace of what's happening inside of AI right now, folks. It's nothing short of mind-boggling. In fact, in the past, companies like Rackspace and others would stand up and say, hey, we keep up with the news so that you don't have to. And in a lot of cases, that continues, but the pace is just more. I don't know how organizations do it without working with partners or have an unlimited budget to hire people to figure these things out. Now, that's an interesting point, though, to bring up, because while there are a lot of new technologies that have to be kept up with and advanced to, it's paired with really that second phase of what they were talking about, and that is how Gen AI is infecting every aspect of the AWS environment. We saw this a few weeks ago at Microsoft's conference, but in this one, their Gen AI assistant, I guess is the way to put it, is called Q. If you're a fan, of course, of the James Bond movies, it reminds me an awful lot of Q, who was the inventor and deliverer of these great gadgets to James Bond to then go out and have an adventure on. So this is really all I'm thinking about when they're talking about Q. But Q is now a part of the Code Whisperer. So Code Whisperer is their ability to, through Gen AI, give it a prompt, have it write you some code. But now they're able to do that in the context of your organization. Meaning, your organization, it's not just about creating code that's right, it has to be right that fits with your code base. But Q can now interrogate and understand that and write code that's good for that. Now it also has the ability to get in and actually really quick on Code Whisperer, another interesting point is they want more and more people to be able to write code and use their Code Whisperer. So if you have an individual subscription, Code Whisperer is free for you. Not a lot of times that organizations show up and have things that are free. All right, so the Code Whisperer also coming in and their Gen AI capabilities around helping organizations to not just write code faster, but also upgrade old code. In fact, their example were old Java applications and how there are a lot of those still sitting around inside of organizations running old code bases. And that's creating security problems, it's creating performance problems, but they're not getting updated because it takes a lot of work. Well, not only is Code Whisperer with Q enabled, able to go in and help you write new code, but it's also able to come in and help you upgrade these old applications. In fact, they inside of AWS, just a couple of developers took 1,000 older Java applications and upgraded them in a year? No. Half a year? No. Month? No. 2 days. They got all that work done in 2 days. In fact, you see Code Whisperer showing up more and more in having the ability to migrate off of maybe other licensed code bases into something that is open source. And of course, then they're advocating for that to be run in their favorite cloud of choice, AWS cloud. All right, you also see it being enabled inside of. I use the phrase infecting, or the word infecting a lot with how AI is just showing up everywhere and enabling things to run better, faster, cheaper, or more better. So it's also part of QuickSight, so their dashboarding for getting visualizing data intelligence, as well as in Amazon Connect, which is, of course, their call center application. So now Q has the ability to join every call that call center rep is on and use the conversation through voice to text as the prompt. So it is behind the scenes listening and providing that agent with helpful answers and solutions to whatever the person is calling about. And then also doing the call reports after the fact and providing recommendations on how that call center rep can do better. So actually listening to both participants in the call. All right, so that gets us through the foundation, and it gets us then into what was happening on through their Gen AI piece with Q. Now, next up, we're going to get into what's happening on the data side. But before we get there, I thought maybe we would cut over to the Betamax from my conversation yesterday with Keith Lawrence with App Dynamics. So why don't we go ahead and roll a portion of that interview. Keith Lawrence, CTO advisor over at Cisco App Dynamics. You guys tout yourselves as being the full stack observability leaders. What is full stack observability?
Yeah, full stack observability, we believe is a change of traditional IT monitoring.
Okay.
At the end of the day, what customers are asking us for is being reactive is not strategic anymore. They want to be in a proactive state, and they want to simplify how they get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so when most people think of IT monitoring, you think of all the different verticals, right? There's your network vertical, there's your server vertical, there's your database vertical, there's your storage vertical. And then you want to monitor across all those things. And then let's not lose sight, there's the cloud, AWS reInvent, right? There's security. And a lot of people, ooh, security, where does that fit in? Well, at the end of the day, what customers need, full stack observability, is how do I monitor across all those things, baseline it, so that I could get out in front of alerts ahead of customers being impacted.
Right.
And then how do I keep customers out of the news from a security perspective that Log4j so uneloquently presented itself to the industry. And then when you think about cost and workload optimization, customers want to know as we come right out of Black Friday, do I have enough capacity to sustain any type of load that I am or am not ready for? And can I automatically spin up microservices and containers to make sure that the end user has a quality experience? And then to be able to spin those things down, because the next big problem people are having is they want to manage their IT spend. Yeah. And so all those things encompass full stack observability, something we were talking about 2.5 years ago, that even when we couldn't do it all, but we knew that was what we had to do.
That was the North Star.
And we're here now, and we're ready.
That's incredible. And I'm so glad you came up with a new phrase to define it, because monitoring just doesn't cut it anymore. Monitoring is, when I think monitoring, I think, let me look at some server logs or database logs or whatever, but those just become different inputs so that, again, it's not just a reactive experience, but a proactive. Because
yeah, so that whole definition of full stack observability, right? When I talked about how we solve for everything and where that GPS to the lens of where root cause is on behalf of that end user, it's interesting within that same strategy, we have a data model. Yeah. And that data model is included with the monitoring piece. So that now when customers are trying to say, hey, is this a P1, P2, P3, P4 type incident outage, they can now see what real-time business impact is to make quicker decisions, to communicate more effectively, to redirect traffic, right, to protect the brand of the organization. And all of that is part of the strategy. So check this out. I'm going to tell you where root cause is, and I'm going to tell you what impact is simultaneously.
Wow. And that's a service that IT hasn't been able to do before. They could just tell you the database server's out and your app's going to be out for a little while. What that means, you're going to have to figure it out.
Correct.
Not anymore, though.
Nope.
This becomes a true tool of the business.
Yes, I believe that traditional IT is starting to go away. It's not advancing customers to be more competitive than their competitors.
Yeah.
And the one who can make themselves proactive, that could protect the brand of the organization, right? We're going to make sure that security piece is a major component that large customers of ours want to make sure they're not the next news story. And our goal is to make sure they're not part of that news story, to get ahead of vulnerability. So imagine I'm not only just being proactive with IT, I'm being proactive with security as well, with an application lens that we can say, hey, there's something out in the industry that you need to be aware of, and we're going to rank and score it for you so we could prioritize that P2, P3 right, for them, and then they can block that vulnerability and keep that end user whole, which makes customers a lot more confident with doing business with folks who have those capabilities.
But Keith, in an environment where you're doing the full stack, that end-to-end thing, there's a lot of stuff in there that the organization, these enterprises can't control. I think about the internet. How do you guys handle for that?
Yeah, so there's a major acquisition we made in August of 2020 called Thousand Eyes, right? I believe it's the best internet monitoring solution there is in the industry.
Yeah.
There's really not a competitor.
And fully baked in.
And it's baked into the full stack observability solution. So our new senior leadership has been very clear. Acquisitions have to be simplified into one platform, right? Into one GUI. Some people say single pane of glass. Sometimes that I like to say a single source of truth. I think that's
better way to put it, because sometimes it's a very small pane of glass that you're looking at on the train.
And then a lot of people say, I don't want to stare at a pane of glass to see what health looks like. I want to proactively get an alert. I want to proactively open up a ticket, route it to where it needs to go, and have people fix it, all behind the scenes, and letting people know, and allowing those folks to communicate to the business what impact is. And all these decisions happen simultaneously. So dashboards remain a real thing, right? The key is they're not infrastructure, right? The business can care less about an infrastructure dashboard.
That's right.
Right? They want to know, can I still deliver my service to the customer? And so now I believe the real dashboards are those that are correlating infrastructure health with business health on a screen, that if business starts tapering off, can they see it's an infrastructure type thing, or is it a bad marketing campaign? Right? They can see both. And so now that dashboard allows them, instead of picking up and blaming the network, which they love to do, right?
They blame anybody not in the room because it's not them.
Now within 5 minutes, you can quickly articulate, it's not infrastructure, it's not the application, is it the internet, is it an ISP provider, is it a BGP protocol? All those things are going into making better decisions for the business, so that they can do what? Protect revenue, generate revenue, and improve customer satisfaction. That's what they're all trying to do.
Not a bad message. Interesting stuff, huh? I love those guys over at App Dynamics. You know, when you start as a monitoring company and then it just explodes into so much more, it's amazing what they have been able to do over there. Well, there's really two other primary areas I wanted to cover with you guys today, and the next gets into data. Now, they used a phrase that I thought was really cool, and that is, data is your differentiator. You know, because if we're homogenized across the cloud platform, and AWS is, you know, if they had their way, then everybody is using that cloud, well, then there's no differentiation there. But where does the differentiation come from? It comes from the data. So there's a lot of focus on the data. They showed some great slides and content around the breadth and depth of their data platform that you have to use. But it's not just a lot of times about the tools that are there, but how do you get your data from wherever it is into the database that it needs to be inside of AWS? And then secondly to that, though, once you're moving into these larger environments like a data lake and so forth, you know, there's that dreaded ETL, or extract, transform, and load, where you've got to take data from one resource, you've got to transform it to make it fit, or a lot of reasons, we won't get into them now, and then load that up into the database. Now that is a challenging process. And in fact, Adam talked a lot about how challenging that was. But they have a vision of a zero ETL world. And how are they doing that? Well, you guessed it, it's Gen AI. AI to the rescue, again, to help move that stuff in. And they already had that for a couple of tools, but they added it for Postgres, MySQL and DynamoDB, where they're able to, in a zero ETL fashion, connect those data resources into a larger warehouse or lake of choice, so that you can then point your Gen AI models and train them accordingly. Now, of course, through all of the presentations today, there was reassurance after reassurance that your company data is not used to train models. It doesn't have access outside of your networks that you define inside of AWS reInvent. All of that content is your data. Now, if that's your differentiator, well, by goodness, it ought to be safe and secure. And there was a lot of talk about security as well, and the tooling that they have to do that, and how it's Gen AI enabled. Everything is. And so then that drew into when we think about all of the capabilities that they announced, whether that it was on the infrastructure side, whether it was part of the data platform or the ETL side, or over with Q and the capabilities that were there, the tool sets that exist inside of AWS just continue to grow. In fact, it was just 2 years ago that Dr. Vogels got up and talked about how there are over 200 different EC2 instance types that were out there. I don't remember if it was 2 years ago or 1 year ago. At any rate, even if it was the same number, that's an awful lot. How would you know which one to use? Well, Q to the rescue, even in this area. So throughout all of AWS, what you'll find is that Q showing up and enabling you to ask a question and find out, well, what is the right resource that I should be using to do this type of compute that I might want to do? So we saw this in other clouds announced earlier this year, and now we find it over here in AWS as well. And quite frankly, it couldn't have come a moment too soon. And it'll, of course, enabling you then to describe the challenge that you have and what you're trying to achieve, and let it make the right recommendations as to what you should use, which is great. And then lastly, they talked about bold bets. And what they were doing with ETL and some other areas was a bold bet for them. I mean, that's some challenging stuff to do. But then they showed a little video of how they are getting into the space of, let's see, what was the right phrase? Give me 1 second here. The project is Kuiper, Kuiper, spelled Kuiper, or pronounced Kuiper, and that is their own low Earth satellite network. I know you're thinking Starlink, as I was when I saw that as well, but it's connecting back into their network specifically as well. So you're able to, through that solution, whether you're providing internet access to individuals who didn't have it in the past or classically haven't had access to it. But the other reason I thought was really interesting was using it to create and get internet access in a private network out to resources at the very edge that maybe need connectivity back but haven't been able to get access to it. They used examples like wind farms, being able to monitor and manage those as they sit far, far away and far, far away from any sort of internet access. So that'll be interesting to see. It is farther down the road, so they say we can start testing in H2 of 2024. And if I heard them correctly, they've got 2 proto-satellites up right now. So a little farther back than Starlink, but their use case, of course, is also very different as well. I don't know if you're planning to go to space, but it's getting crowded up there, all these satellites. All right, well, this was our day 1 recap. Everything that's fit to announce, here's what we saw. So if you want to learn more, of course, I'd love for you to head over to Rackspace's own webpage, follow that QR code that's on the screen now. Now, we'll be back tomorrow. We're going to talk very deeply about what's happening in the data and AI space. We'll probably also show a couple of clips from the interviews that I'm conducting throughout the day today with some amazing AWSers. So until tomorrow, everybody, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. My name is Jeff DeVerter, Chief Technology Evangelist for us here at Rackspace Technology. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are, and meet me back here tomorrow afternoon to get all the news that you need to know of what's going on at AWS reInvent 2023.